Welcome to the May 3rd version of the European History Lecture. We were on National Socialism. Before I go too much farther, you know how we haven't had a quiz or a test in a while? That's a hint. It's like in the old movies where they say it's quiet, too quiet. So if I were you, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some kind of quiz or test coming out sometime over the next few days, dealing with the massive stuff we've covered. You okay?
Oh yeah, it's just yawning.
Okay. Okay. Good. So, where we left things on Friday, I showed you part of an extended clip from the movie Judgment at Nuremberg. Unfortunately, with your class, I didn't show you the whole thing because of time. It was what you would expect professional actors to produce, a moving explanation of the fact that people who were mentally incompetent, as determined by the National Socialist government of Germany, were sterilized against their will. And this policy was designed to engage in the kind of eugenics that Nazis were famous for believing in. If you view human beings as simply another form of livestock, then eugenics makes total sense. You improve the breed. By the way, feel free to move as the fans bother. You breed for certain characteristics. As such, what you're going to do is, if you don't want a large number of people with substandard IQs or with this or that or the other handicap, you prevent them from passing those traits on to the next generation. If you ever wondered why some people are so loath to accept the theories of Charles Darwin, look at the Nazi policy on race. Whether or not, and I happen to believe in evolution, I believe it's divinely inspired, just like everything. But I have no trouble with the idea of it. The problem is, with evolution comes a philosophical caveat that we are merely beasts. No different from cattle or horses or dogs or lions. We simply are the beast that stands on two legs and talks. If we are merely beasts, then all of these notions of human rights, human dignity, being made in the image of God, all of that is just fantasy. You hope that you're lucky enough to be born into a society that believes that fantasy. Because if you don't, then you get to experience life the hard way, with a government that treats you like a commodity, like a slave, like livestock. Hitler was very careful how he treated the German people. But he viewed all peoples, including the German people, as different races of animals. Animals are here for our use. If you accept the Darwinian principle that there is no intrinsic difference between human beings and the lower life forms, then inevitably someone will come along and treat human beings like the lower life forms. This is the problem. Don't get so wrapped up in the science that you fail to see what people are really objecting to. People are not ignorantly adhering to Genesis in literal terms simply to be stubborn, like flat earthers. I've seen that view come from people who are devotees of science, and it's arrogant. It's truly obnoxiously arrogant. The assumption is that anyone who wouldn't believe in evolution must also believe that the world is flat, that the earth is the center of the universe, and a bunch of other medieval notions. people who principally object to evolution object to it on two grounds. One, is it probable that we, intelligent life forms, and all of the myriad other life forms on this planet are the result of mere chance? I don't find that persuasive. I never have. That's why I believe evolution is guided. By the way, it doesn't take a god with angels to do that. Let's imagine life as something that grows the way plants grow. You plant the seed, and life will go as it's programmed by DNA. Evolutionary processes might be implicit in the earliest form of life, and life may simply develop evolutionary traits according to what the environmental conditions are. In other words, it's possible that if the same basic life form that developed on Earth in the Earth's oceans 3.8 billion years ago spawned in a slightly different environment, that life would be both recognizable and fundamentally different. Recognizable because it followed a similar form growth to ours, but different because the environment was different. In any case, I'm babbling. The point is, people doubt the accidental nature of us because we are very complicated. People also doubt the philosophical implications. That you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals. And if you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, there is nothing to prevent you and me from being treated like such by people who are more powerful than us. If there is no philosophical and religious notion holding them back, the exercise of raw power will be visited upon humanity, as it was in the early 20th century, as it is in China, North Korea, Cuba, and a number of other totalitarian hellholes around the world today. Those governments don't view us as the children of any god. Those governments view us as livestock. And they treat their own people, anyone else they get their hands on, as livestock. However, the first of two occasions where the German people stand up to Hitler happens as a result of his policies on forced sterilization. The reason is most of us know people who are mentally handicapped, who are mentally retarded, or who have developmental disabilities, or who have physiological problems with their nervous system. Most of us know people personally. Maybe we are related to people who have these issues. Now, a eugenicist like Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, would say that people like that would be better off not existing. And so one of the horror shows of abortion on demand is the possibility that people will get genetic counseling and discover that their child might have Down syndrome or might be substandard in terms of their IQ. And the parents would abort on that basis because they don't want to deal with it. On the one hand, who would? It's a very difficult thing to raise a child under the best of circumstances. But to raise a child with special needs? On the other hand, you are literally playing God, deciding who lives and who dies. I don't know who you know who has those conditions. I can tell you one of the first encounters I had. I wanted to get a new kind of job. So in the early 1990s, I applied for a job to establish a residential program for people that were being moved out of a state institution called Pineland Center in Maine. These people have developmental disabilities. We were going to start with a single pilot house for a year. I would be the manager of that house. I would set it up, hire the people, establish the protocols, do everything. It was a very satisfying job, very demanding job. And then I would set up other houses. And the purpose would be to establish community-based group homes for people with developmental disabilities. And the first guy we had in the single house that was going to be sort of the pilot program was this huge 20-year-old guy. I mean, 6'5", muscular, not fat at all. Loved to walk around, loved physical exercise. Had the mental capacity of a toddler. Had what it was called porencephaly, which is a condition brought about by a lack of folic acid in the mother's diet during pregnancy that result literally in Swiss cheese-style holes in the brain. This young man was violent. And when you're that big, violence is serious. Not because he was bad-tempered, exactly, but because his nervous system didn't know how to process stress, so he just lashed out. And we learned to deal with it, to restrain him, to protect him from himself, and to protect others from him, because we took him out in the community all the time. But if you weren't careful, he was dangerous. So everyone who worked with him understood that. Well, about 9 months into working with him, Tina and I had a cat. First pet we ever had. Found him in a dumpster, raised him from much younger than you're supposed to have a kitten. We nursed him with a bottle. One of the things that you don't learn growing up necessarily is that cats don't get born knowing how to go to the bathroom. You got to stimulate the region with a warm, damp rag. Or your tongue, and I chose to use the warm, damp rag instead of tea. So, this cat grew up, and we were very close to him. It was like a kid. I mean, we didn't have any kids, we still don't. So he was the closest thing we had, and we raised him from infancy. When we moved to Maine from Connecticut, when he was about 3.5, he suddenly developed an enlarged heart. There were problems that came about very quickly. There was a horrible night where he was paralyzed, and then he died that morning, around dawn, in my arms. Tina, my wife, loved this kitten like all get out. I had to arrange for coverage at the house because I was going to stay home the next couple of days to help her deal, and to deal myself. It was quite a blow. It was death. And we stopped at the house, and Tina waited in the driveway, and the person who was on duty was getting the young man ready to go out. So I went to the office and started calling people and getting people to cover my shift. And as I came out, Tina hadn't noticed the young man walk up to her. The person on duty had forgotten something in the house. So the young man was out, and he was heading to the van that we had. Tina wasn't paying attention, so he was right at her, right in front of her. And then she noticed him, and he was within grasping, and she knew, she had seen him. And he looks into her eyes and reaches out with this massive hand and pats her on the shoulder as if to say, "It'll be okay." Sweetest look. And then goes on and gets in the van and waits. He could have thrown her across a fence. But he expressed empathy. My best friend's sister died in a New York group home of a medical overdose because of incompetence in giving meds. I've had several people in my life that have had these issues. And all of them have proven their humanity as if they had anything to prove to anyone. The thought of aborting anyone like this is horrific to me, because I don't pretend to know the mind of God. God clearly chose these people to be born for a reason I don't fully understand. But he was the first person outside to express sympathy to my wife. Whereas the people in her office said, "But it's just a cat." They didn't understand. When Hitler started sterilizing these people, their families reacted. But they didn't take to the streets. They didn't start waving signs or chanting slogans. The mothers talked to their friends and neighbors, the wives of local Nazi leaders. The wives of local Nazi leaders talked to the wives of national Nazi leaders, who talked to the leaders who talked to Hitler. And Hitler backed off. He backed off from this policy because this policy was causing a deep anger among the German people. These were not strangers. These were Germans. They were born wrong, but they were born Germans. It basically touched upon the essential Judeo-Christian value of human life that is at the heart of most Western societies. All Western societies, really. And Hitler realized he had gone too far. He had alienated his own support, and he backed off from the policy. We're going to learn about the other time he backed off a little later. Just remember, the wives got Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party to back off from the forced sterilization of mentally handicapped. Now, one of the products of the Nazi state was what the SS did. The SS, again, wore the Hugo Boss black uniforms with the lightning SS and the death's head on their foreheads, on their hats, on their military caps. The Guard Force, the Schutzstaffel, became a state within a state. There were the Nazi government organs of power, the army, the police force, and so on. But the SS reflected all of that in a party form. The army was still the army, but the SS established Waffen-SS units, that is, military SS units, and they got the best equipment and the best training by far. They became the elite units of the German army in World War II. The SS establishes with the national police Gestapo, the special state police. Gestapo, the special state police. And the special state police were the criminal thought police. The Gestapo monitored people's words, they monitored people's behavior, and they rewarded and punished based not so much on German law, but on whether or not it was in harmony or in dissonance to Nazi party policies. Soon, the Gestapo could make anyone in Germany feel afraid. The most high-born aristocrat, the most wealthy plutocrat, the most highly placed government official, field marshals and generals within the German army, admirals within the German navy, stars of movie, stage, and anyone in Germany that was approached by Gestapo realized that they were this close to the people who decided who went to the concentration camps, who got re-educated, who got yanked out of society in the middle of the night by jackbooted thugs knocking on your door. The Gestapo terrified everyone except for Hitler, because they were Hitler's special state police. And the thing about them that was special is just like what makes James Bond special in the fictional 007 series of movies and books. James Bond has a license to kill. In other words, James Bond, the secret agent of mid to late 20th century fame, is authorized to kill by Her Majesty's government for the sake of government policy. Normally, people are not authorized to kill in the service of their country, unless it's wartime. James Bond was. The Gestapo is authorized to arrest and detain without having to give you a formal charge, without having to process you in the normal criminal fashion. So you may disappear on your way home or in the middle of some night and your family has no idea where you are. And they ask and nobody knows. That is, among other powers of the Gestapo. Now, Dachau is the first of the concentration camps. It's at first run by the SA, and it was basically sort of a bully camp. You go to camp and get bullied. But after the Night of the Long Knives, the SS takes over Dachau, and other concentration camps are established. Now, a concentration camp is like, have you ever seen in a supermarket sort of a cardboard cylinder with metal ends that has orange juice in it? This isn't so common today as it was when I was growing up. But what it is fruit juice concentrate. You get apple juice, cranberry juice, orange juice in this little frozen cylinder, and you take it out and you mix it with water, and that's your fruit juice. And if you mix the right amount of water, it's just fine. It's almost fine. Be all like that. It's not real juice. Well, it goes through the concentration process. I won't disagree with you. Fresh juice is always better. But what it is the gathering of all sorts of fruit juice into the concentrate smallest form. So you end up with this hyper sweet, syrupy, frozen stuff. More sweet than a popsicle. Because I know I ate the concentrate sometimes when I was mad to myself. What a concentration camp is for is to gather people and hold them. The British developed the world's first concentration camps, as you may remember, in the Anglo-Boer War, to get the South African farmers away from the South African commandos. By putting the farm population behind barbed wire, the commandos were no longer able to be supported by sympathetic farmers or supported by intimidated farmers. Dachau was set up to gather the enemies of the state in one place. It wasn't a prison with all the, amenities like solid walls, roofs that don't leak, running water. It's a camp in the middle of the wilderness with barracks that are built in the most primitive way. And people are gathered or concentrated there so that they're not out in society. Being sent to Dachau was not like being sent to a normal prison. The people who ran the camp, the SS eventually, would feel perfectly comfortable using you for slave labor. Or using you to, build the camp and then build other camps. If you disobeyed at a place like Dachau, you were already outside the normal world, so there would be no restraint in them punishing you. When they punished you, it could result in your disfigurement or your death, and there is no recourse. Dachau is an extra-legal concentration camp in that it doesn't operate according to the laws that govern normal German prisons. And it's primarily for political prisoners. But understand, concentration camps, as horrible as they are, and as lethal as they were, because when you went there you could very well die, were not what happened later. What happened later were death camps. Death camps were factories designed to turn living enemies of the state into bodies, dead bodies. They were factories that produced death. We don't have death camps during peacetime. Those don't come about until a few years into World War II. As to the third kind of camp, labor camp, some concentration camps were set up in conjunction with German cartels and corporations to provide slave labor, but this again was something that usually happened after World War II began. It's November 1938. It's the anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch. So I think around November 11th, 1938. A German diplomat in Paris is assassinated. A Jew is captured as the assassin. The Jew likely wanted to get back at the Nazis for all of the horrible things they were doing to the Jews. But word was sent out through the Nazi Party organs that if the diplomat died, certain things would happen simultaneously all over Germany. And as night fell, the announcement that the German diplomat had died was sent out. All over Germany, in every city neighborhood, in every rural area that had Jews, Jewish businesses, Jewish synagogues and temples, Jewish homes, crowds began to gather. And as the sun set, speakers began to call the people together and work them into a frothing rage. A Jew had killed a German diplomat. We've tried dealing in a restrained way with the Jews, these Nazis said. And do they have any gratitude? No. They just resent it. They complain. They hate us. They are a human cancer who we are cutting out. And they are fighting us. This must stop. As full dark came, bonfires were built, torches and clubs were gathered, and people went. There were bricks and rocks that suddenly appeared. And when people went at the Jewish businesses and at the Jewish homes, they went with hands full and a place to get more. The first thing that happened was they shattered every glass pane window that they could see. This gives the name to this event, KRISTALLNACHT, the night of broken glass. After breaking all the windows, Juden, kommen! Jew, come here! The men and boys were being called out of their homes. If the Jews immediately left their homes to go out to the crowd, they were beaten. If they didn't, the crowds surged into their homes, broke down the doors, went in through the broken glass windows, and would drag the Jewish men and boys into the street. They would also smack the women and children and girls around. The home would then be ransacked. It would be looted. It would be vandalized and defaced. If any Jew fought back, he'd be crippled or killed. Hundreds of Jews were taken that night to Dachau and to other concentration camps. Then the fires started. Every synagogue and temple in Germany was burned to the ground. As dawn came the next morning, the pall of smoke coming from all over Germany, every Jewish community in Germany, because the Jews had been identified, darkened the skies. Kristallnacht was a pogrom, Russian style. Remember a pogrom? A government-sanctioned anti-Jewish riot. The police sat by and watched. The police laughed and joked with the guys who were doing this. I haven't gotten to the worst part, though. The worst part of the night of broken glass was who was in these crowds. These crowds weren't shipped in. They weren't rent-a-mobs. They were the neighbors of the Jews. People who had lived on the same street, who had exchanged cups of sugar, people who used to send their children to school together, people who helped each other out the way neighbors do. These weren't strangers. These were the neighbors and former friends of the Jews that did it. Think about that. What would it take to turn neighbor on neighbor in such an intimate way? Make them beat them, sometimes to death, in front of their wives, in front of their children. Make them go into their homes and violate the women and children there, hour after hour, and then set fire. And the fire department is there just to make sure that the Jewish homes don't catch Christian homes on fire. or German homes. You've got to understand what totalitarianism can do includes this. A totalitarian government with all the power of propaganda at its disposal, all the ability to reward and punish at its disposal that anyone could want, given the right amount of time, can turn you and your next door neighbor, who you basically get along with, into enemies willing to do any horrible thing. Willing to kill, willing to disgrace, anything. That's big. Because that means that the basic human relationships that civilization are supposed to build don't matter anymore. What matters is the propaganda. What matters is the hate. That's what's real. Kristallnacht, though, is the only nationwide pogrom against the Jews that the National Socialists perform. Because once again, the wives and mothers of Germany begin a whisper campaign to the wives of Nazi Party officials. These riots didn't happen somewhere else. They happened in our neighborhood. Our children heard this. They saw this. They saw their neighbors' homes being ransacked. They saw their neighbors' homes being violated. They saw their neighbors being beaten. They saw their neighbors' homes burned. Little children don't understand this. This is not in Ordnung. In Ordnung is the German word for in order. A German Hausfrau defines her honor by everything in the house, housewife, being in order, in Ordnung. A place for everything and everything in its place. No dust on the cabinets, no dish out of place. Clean and orderly home. That is what a Hausfrau defines her pride as. If her home is in Ordnung, and when she's raising her little children, their lives must be in Ordnung as well. Well, this was not in Ordnung. And their complaints were hot, angry. Again, the Nazi Party leadership heard. Hitler heard. Never again would a pogrom happen. It was realized that pogroms were very Russian. They weren't German. They involved drunken rage, public drunken rage, chaos in the streets. Not very German. Germans want things in Ordnung. So from Kristallnacht, government policy changed. And everything that was done with the Jews and with other victims of the Nazis was done in a way that provided discretion and deniability. Discretion. It was done quietly, without fanfare, without shouting, without breaking glass, without riots in the street. And with deniability. The Jews just disappeared. We don't know where they went. We don't know what they did. You could live by a railroad. The railroad that goes by your house past your backyard goes to what used to be a mine. It's a little refinery, a little mineral refining plant. And as time went on towards the war and during the war, suddenly carload after carload after train carload of Jews is going down that dead-end line, coming back empty. A smart person does not put two and two together. A smart person does not wonder where those Jews go because there's nowhere for them to go. That's a dead end. There's a facility that they built there, that facility is probably to do with the mine. But it's not my business. Jews go down the dead end line, empty carts go back. Jews go down, empty carts go back. You don't put two and two together. You don't connect the dots. Because if you put two and two together and you connect the dots and you're wondering where all the Jews are going down this dead end line, you're going to come to conclusions that will be inconvenient. You'll come to conclusions that will force you to take a stand or to admit the evil. Either those Jews are walking away from that facility, or those Jews are being used in the mine or in labor, and they just keep needing more and more and more, or something is happening to those Jews that cause them to wear out so quickly that they need to be replaced constantly. If you put two and two together, if you connect the dots, if you use your logical faculties and draw conclusions, you'll realize that either evil exists. That evil exists down at the end of that train line. That evil exists because the government set it up. And when you recognize that evil exists, you have to do something about it. So most people who don't want to deal with that will do whatever it takes to avoid noticing, to avoid thinking about it, to avoid drawing conclusions about it. What they will do, what we will do as human beings, what we do to avoid inconvenient truth is we suppress it. And anything that threatens us with a revelation that we don't want, we shut out. An entire nation of people did that after Kristallnacht. Now, during World War II, Nazi policy at home doesn't stop. There is a positive side to the Nazi idea of eugenics, and it's expressed in the Lebensborn Program, the birth-life program. Lebensborn is a program to find young women of pure German stock who are the ideal physically and mentally and emotionally. Cream-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, good strong skeleton, good strong musculature, healthy, vivacious, strong drives. And if these young women are in bad circumstances, if their families are poor, if they are isolated, if they're marginalized, the party offers them an opportunity to join Lebensborn. They will be taken to a Schloss, that's a castle, in the mountains in the south of Germany. Beautiful places. And there they will learn flower arrangement and poetry and cooking and hairdressing and all of the feminine arts. And they'll have opportunities to swim and to walk and to ride horses and to exercise. This goes on during World War II. And they eat good food compared to everyone else because they're right near the source of much of the food. They drink clean water and they breathe air and they're healthy, healthy, healthy. And every so often the SS men came. And the SS men are also picked for their size, tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and their dedication to the Nazi cause. And being SS men, their genetics have already been checked. You can't join the SS without having your genealogy checked to make sure it's free of subhumans and slaves. The SS men and the women would have assignations. They would have a romantic evening that would end with sex. The SS men probably had wives and children back home. But that didn't matter. Because what was happening in Lebensborn was a patriotic duty. What you're doing is you're breeding the best male and female specimens to produce the leading elements of a new master race. If the German people and the Aryan nation are Herrenvolk, if they are Übermensch, then this group of Lebensborn children are going to be the supermen of the supermen because they are particularly bred, purpose-bred for their qualities, and they're not going to be raised by moms. And they're not going to be raised by dads in homes with families and all that retro stuff. They're going to be raised by the party to be the leading faction within the new order. Now, I knew a girl who is now a West German television reporter when she and I were in college together. And she absolutely was a product of this program, the child, at least, of somebody in Lebensborn. She had all of the qualities that they wanted. There's a reason why she ended up on television. Beautiful, smart, charming. Absolute Nazi ideal. And she wasn't a Nazi. And I don't think her parents were Nazis. Being part of the program, having a mother or a father who was born into that program wasn't a choice any more than you choose your family. You just ended up where you ended up. But Lebensborn is an attempt to purpose breed a new race of leaders. As Germany took off, and it wasn't a bad deal for the women. They were breeding the new generation, and they were treated very, very well. Again, they lived like princesses. They just had to get pregnant every year. Once a year. Boom. You put out a baby for the empire. That's what you do. And now the hierarchy of races is applied when when Germany takes over Europe. But one of the things that is typical of totalitarians is euphemism. And I think I've talked about this, but I'm just going to say it again. I don't like euphemisms. I don't like soft language. I don't like it because of what it allows people to do. Kurt Waldheim was once Secretary General of the United Nations. He was the highest official on planet Earth in the mid-1970s to the early 1980s. Kurt Waldheim's voice is on a gold record that both Voyager probes sent out into interstellar space, greeting alien life in the name of all mankind. But in World War II, Kurt Waldheim helped schedule trains, including trains to the death camps. He was protected and defended by many people in the global elite. He was their friend. And after all, he didn't know. He was simply moving product to processing facilities. That's all. Product to processing facilities. The product were Jews, men, women, and children, pregnant women and babies, old people. The processing facilities were Treblinka, Auschwitz, Sobibor, and a bunch of other death camps. He helped schedule those trains. Now the question is, does that make him complicit in genocide? Well, whatever your answer is, understand that it was made easier because the language said product processing facilities. The product comes in the gate and leaves by the chimney. So, at the Wannsee Conference in 1942, when the decision is made to go for the physical solution, and the physical solution was the extermination of the Jewish race in Europe, it wasn't called genocide, it wasn't called extermination. It was simply called the final solution to the Jewish question. That's all. The final solution to the Jewish question. As if it was a geometry theorem, as if it was a math problem. It's the final solution, don't you know, to the Jewish question. It sounds so good. Beware of euphemism, and beware of people who like it. If you can't call a spade, if you can't say 2 + 2 is 4 without ruffling somebody's figures, this is another reason why I don't use politically correct speech. Because speech is not supposed to be soft. Speech is not supposed to divorce us from reality. Speech is supposed to connect us to reality. Somebody comes back from war, hopping on one leg like a turkey and banging their head into cement walls. They have shell shock. Somebody can't sleep at night because they wake up screaming and attacking the windows. They have shell shock. We call it, well, in World War II, battle fatigue. Oh, he's tuckered out. He's got battle. No, it's the same condition. We today call it post-traumatic stress disorder. So two-syllable word, shell shock, becomes a four-syllable word, battle fatigue term, becomes post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think is 16 syllables. Post-traumatic stress disorder. 8 syllables. Sorry, 8. So we've gone from 2 to 4 to 8 syllables. And we have made the human suffering of those victims more and more and more clinical. We are more and more divorced from the reality of that. If you hide yourself from life by using soft language, you're denying yourself access to reality. And if you have a government that habitually does that, you have a government that believes that as a matter of course, as standard practice, we must lie about what we're doing. Because if we were honest, who knows what would happen. So I have just given you an overview of the domestic policy of the National Socialist German Workers' Party before and during World War II. If there are no questions, comments, or thoughts, I don't think there are, and you may talk quietly among yourselves until dismissal. Thank you.